and it will be shared on the internet. This is so that you can watch it back again, and also for those who have been unable to attend tonight. We'll always talk with our video on so you can see our faces, but your video is automatically turned off. As you've joined the meeting, you are on mute. Background noise can be quite distracting. We will keep ourselves on mute when we're not talking. We've got quite a few slides tonight to get through. We will run through those, and we've got time and spaces for questions. When it is time to use the Q&A section, type in your question and press send. If you'd like to ask your question verbally, please raise your hand, and we'll try to answer as many questions during the session tonight as we can. If we don't get to you this evening, we will come back to every question via email. Any technical issues, please let us know using the Q&A. If you can't hear the speaker, see the presentation, again, just use that Q&A. Lily will monitor this throughout and flag anything to us. And we'll do our best to fix any issues. If you do get cut off, please just rejoin or get in touch after the event, and we'll try to help you get on another session. So, as I said, the session this evening focuses on our northern neighbourhood area in the local plan, the draft local plan. So while I take you through the format tonight, Lily has put up a poll, or asked a question. She's putting up a poll where we would like to know the particular matters of interest for those of you here tonight. So that would be, I think, quite useful for us to know and for you to know about each other as well. So this evening we're going to go through and look at the local plan context first, before taking you through the North area neighbourhoods, the principles, policy aims, and we'll highlight some of the site allocations. There is a lot of detail on the slides tonight, and we won't go through them all in minute detail, but we will circulate the presentation after the session for everyone to review. So Lily, have we had the answers to the poll?
Yeah, I'll just share them with you now. There we go.
Okay, interesting. So a lot of interest in site allocations and housing numbers, and landscape parks and open spaces as well. So that's good. That's good to see. So I'm going to start by just taking you through a bit of the context with the local plan. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. So first of all, part of our development plan is the London plan, and that was adopted today. So our local plan needs to be in conformity with that London plan. The London plan sets out the key areas for growth and regeneration across London. Importantly for us, it also sets our housing target. So that is over 1,600 homes per year, so up 20% from the current target. And I think for us, the London plan, along with the National Planning Policy Framework that sits above the London plan, sets a lot of the planning context for us. So the role of the local plan is what we're discussing tonight, setting those local area strategies, as well as things like housing mix, design, employment areas, and priorities for open spaces and public realm. So the growth challenge, and I think we do recognise that it is a challenge. So we need to have 25,000 new homes built across the plan period, with many more of those being genuinely affordable homes. We want to create an inclusive local economy and deliver new workspace. An important role for the local plan going forward really is about that recovery piece as well, and how we can support the borough and our people to recover, and that really does include the high streets as well, with new floor space proposed for retail uses. And then underpinning all of this is around new and improved infrastructure to support that growth and the new people in the borough. So this is one of our key diagrams. For those of you who are familiar with our existing policies, you may recognise some of the things on this plan. The red shaded area outlines the opportunity area, and that is something set by the London Plan and covers the north area of the borough and this patch of Deptford and New Cross. So what we're looking to do through this spatial strategy is identify areas for regeneration and areas for growth, and highlight district centres and focus those around the London Plan opportunity areas. However, what we've wanted to do with this plan is to really recognise and celebrate the local areas, and I think some of the missing layers that were in our last plan of having key strategic moves, very detailed policies, but wanting that detail in the middle. So if we can go on to the next slide, what this will show you is how we have sought to really distinguish the areas of the borough, and looking at this northern area, and all highlighted and coming out from the local characterisation study, which is one of our pieces of evidence for the local plan. So we went out to the community and try to understand the neighbourhoods that people felt that they lived in, through a series of workshops and public consultation. And what we recognised was that there were some distinct areas where we felt that we could have some place-based strategies, but some of those boundaries, and a lot of them are blurred. So this has really led us to this local plan and this approach that we are proposing and that we're consulting on this evening. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Eric to take you through the detail in Lewisham's north area from the draft local plan, and then we'll have time for questions.
Great, thank you, Emma, for that introduction. I just wanted to call attention to the term good growth, because you'll be seeing it throughout the presentations on the sub areas. This is a term that is set out in the new London Plan, and it's defined as growth that is socially and economically inclusive and environmentally sustainable. So for Lewisham, helping to deliver the aspirations of the London Plan, we really are looking at good growth and how we give effect to that locally. So what we're looking at through this next series of slides is the north area and how we are trying to deliver on those aspirations of the London Plan, recognizing the distinctiveness of Lewisham's neighborhoods and communities. So as Emma pointed out before, through the characterization study, we honed in on sort of 3 areas that shared similar characteristics in terms of their built form, landscape, history, and again, there's a blurring of the areas, so they're not definitive, but they help us to drill down to a more local approach to the strategies. And what we'll be looking at now is North Deptford, Deptford, and New Cross. And some of the images that you can see here are really reflecting some of the new development that has been enabled through the existing plan, the core strategy, and the package of documents that support that, and trying to reflect how new development is integrated within the existing character and neighborhoods of the borough. But before we crack on to the next bits, we just wanted to do another quick poll and ask what your relationship to the local area is. This will just help us to get an understanding of those people that are joining us today, and maybe help us to tailor some of the elements of the slides to the audience. I'll just give a second and perhaps we can reveal the results of the poll shortly. Lily, are you able to provide us with the... So definitely Deptford is there, but it does feel like there's representation from all parts of the area. Interestingly, people who live outside of the north but are still interested in the proposals, and that's really good as well. So when we're looking at the north area, people will be able to appreciate that the council has undertaken a lot of work previously in terms of the strategy, and there's been a lot of consultation, for example, on the North Deptford consultation, the North Lewisham Links program, more recently, the New Cross Area Framework, which is a key evidence-based document which has underpinned the plan in which we are trying to reflect through it, and then the characterization study. So I think the main point here is that the local plan is not necessarily starting from scratch. There's been a lot of earlier work done and some pre-engagement on the local plan to get to the point where we are at now in terms of the proposals. We also need to recognize that there is a designated neighborhood area that covers a large part of this area within the borough. And there's a neighborhood forum who was preparing work on a plan, and Emma can maybe provide you with a bit more detail on that in the question period. I'm sure some members of the forum will have some questions for the panel as well. But it's just important to note that neighborhood planning allows local community groups who are designated as forums to prepare plans for the area, and they have to work in partner with the London plan and the strategic policies in the local plan. So there's a relationship between the documents, and we will be sharing the boundaries of the other neighborhood areas as we go through the other key character areas of the borough in future presentations. So this is just honing in a bit more on the key diagram that Emma had showed you previously, and really highlighting that most of this area, if not all of it, is covered by that London plan opportunity area. And some of the key circles that you'll see there, the blue circle is a regeneration node looking around Deptford Creek side. And then elsewhere, some key growth nodes, which are focused around some of the larger strategic sites, such as Convoys Wharf and Surrey Canal Triangle, also around New Cross Gate, and we'll get to those in a minute. So site allocations are a type of planning policy. So we can set out land use principles and development guidelines for specific sites. What these do help us to do is demonstrate through the local plan that we can deliver on needs for housing, workspace, and community facilities, as well as using them to set out specific requirements for developers to deliver, such as public transport improvements where they're required strategically, or just to support the local areas. Now, a lot of the site allocations for this part of the borough were already site allocations in the existing adopted plan. Some of them have started to be delivered, and we're effectively carrying these over to ensure that those principles remain intact and so that we can see them through their full delivery. But there's been a number of other new sites that have been identified. Part of that has been through the London plan process and what they call a strategic housing land availability assessment, which was effectively a sifting exercise that we worked with the Mayor of London on. But also we've undertaken several call for sites exercises, asking the wider public, including landowners, developers, to submit sites for consideration in the new local plan. It's also important to stress that the majority of these site allocations will be delivered by developers and not necessarily the council. Certainly the council will be a landowner and have an interest in bringing forward some of the sites, but the vast majority of the sites in the local plan are owned by developers and will be brought forward privately. So what we're trying to do here is set a clear direction for how we want those sites to be developed in the future to support good growth within the borough. It's also important to note that these are just proposals at this stage. some of the sites already have planning consent, so there's little we can do in terms of influencing the future of those from the planning approval process. But there are other new sites which we are seeking feedback from the public on. So North Deptford, one of the key principles that we're trying to present through this local plan is knitting new neighborhoods together with those existing successful areas. Some of that has already started to occur through the development of the key strategic sites that I've noted previously, but also there's plans in the future. For example, in the bottom right-hand corner, this is some renderings from the Surrey Canal Triangle site, where we prepared a supplementary planning document as well to set out a clear strategy for how that can develop into the future. Now, as Emma mentioned before, there is a lot of detail in these slides. So I'm going to try and pick out some of the key things that have changed in this draft local plan from the existing documents. It's important to note that this area will continue to be one of the key regeneration areas for the borough. So there's significant growth planned here. We're not shying away from that, but we are quite clear that this has to be managed, changed as well. A lot of it has to deal with the underused and vacant industrial sites, which we're seeking to transform into mixed-use developments and indeed high-quality neighborhoods. Some of the key proposals that are new relate to the land at Trunleys Road and at the edge of Folkestone Gardens and Deptford Park, where there's some industrial land which we are looking to allocate for employment-led mixed-use redevelopment. Part of the rationale is to create a higher quality workspace with a no net loss of workspace principle, but also to improve the overall environment and public realm in that area, and so that these sites will effectively together act as a new mixed-use employment-led quarter, which helps to provide for a transition to the heavier industrial uses in the strategic industrial location to the west, and then providing a improved interface with the development that's coming up at Surrey Canal Triangle. Part of what we will be doing is redesignating new employment land at something called the Bermondsey Dive Under, which was previously used by National Rail for infrastructure improvements. It's now become vacant, so we feel that there's an opportunity to use this land in a different way, and we've prepared a feasibility study to show how that can be accomplished. And then we are proposing policies within the plan to help address that. I think one of the other things just to mention about the Surrey Canal Triangle is securing the future of Millwall Football Club, but as part of a wider collection of sites, bringing together new and improved public open space, transport infrastructure improvements, and really a new neighborhood built around there. In terms of design and heritage, the characterization study had different types of typologies for sort of looking at how we could build on the future of the borough, and parts of this area were certainly considered where there could be scope for reimagining places, particularly around the underused and vacant industrial sites. Our evidence-based study in terms of the tall building study shows that this is a suitable location for tall buildings. That's not to say that tall buildings will be pepper potted throughout the area, but what we will be saying is that in principle, we will consider these, but obviously we'll have rigorous policies in place to ensure that these are designed to an exceptional quality. It's also important to ensure that we're responding to North Deptford's industrial heritage. So it's quite critical that we have high quality workspace and employment areas within this part of the borough. It's not just enough to give over a bunch of land to housing. It has to really function properly. And for us, that means a mix of uses, employment uses working well beside residential uses and community facilities and open spaces. In terms of some of the investment that we have secured and we're looking to deliver into the future to support the levels of planned growth, a new overground station and upgrades around Surrey Canal Road, bus service improvements, a cycle superhighway along Evelyn Street, and building on the Lewisham Links network of walking and cycle paths, looking at new Thames River passenger service at Convoys Wharf, plus a lot of work around retail and leisure opportunities, basically transforming some of the offer that already exists, but also delivering new through our site allocations. And finally, we just want to note that there is a site allocation for the Riverside Youth Club and 2000 Community Action Center, but we're setting clear principles in place that we're looking for refurbishment and where appropriate, a replacement, so that we will continue to have this type of community facility within the local area. But through a site allocation, it might provide a more viable future for the facility. In terms of landscape and public open spaces, there's lots of work in terms of the Surrey Canal Triangle and what we've secured through Section 106 agreements. We are looking as well as wherever practical to introduce new public open space. I think the north area, unlike perhaps some other areas in the borough that we're planning for, has larger sites where it's quite feasible to bring forward significant amounts of public open space, new public open space, but also improvements. In some other areas of the borough, we might not have the same amount of opportunities. So it's about improving what is existing and making better access to those spaces. But here, there's a real opportunity to create new public open space and green space. So I think for now, we can cut it off and perhaps explore more about North Deptford through the questions.
Thanks, Eric. Lily, do you want to help us with some questions?
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to field them a couple at a time and invite the project team to respond. So first one from Stuart, who says, a lot of recent developments had large retail spaces on the ground floor which remained unlet for lengthy periods. If several thousand metres square of retail space is one of the commitments, do we know that that much space is actually in demand? And the second from Andrea, who says, some of that engagement, North Deptford, for example, was over a decade ago, and a lot has changed since then. So Stuart's question first on retail space, please.
Thanks for that. I will answer that one. So I think, you know, part of this consultation is not only going out to the local community, but is going out to landowners to understand, is there still the demand for that retail space? So I think that is a question that we need to answer through this consultation. We have an evidence base that says we need that amount of retail, and we need that in order to deliver on the aspirations that we have for the borough. Obviously, you know, COVID has changed things in a way that none of us quite know the answer to that. So it's definitely something that we need to consider. In terms of the vacant space in places such as Lewisham Town Centre, what we do have outside of the local areas, there are some much stronger policies about the level of fit out that we would expect in a retail unit or in a commercial space, to make sure that it's affordable. What we found is that for some units, the upfront cost of delivering those, moving in, you know, if you need to put in your own shop front, then that automatically means that it's unaffordable for quite a few businesses. So we now look to secure that upfront. To answer Andrea's question as well, or comment, again, I'll answer this one too. I think we definitely recognise that some of the engagement in Deptford was carried out a long time ago. However, a number of these developments are taking a long time to deliver, and I think some of the findings from those are still informing our approach. You know, when we asked people the areas that where they felt safe and the areas where they didn't feel safe, that identified some of the routes that we felt needed to be improved. And some of those plans are still in place, and some of those developments are still leading on those principles. But we definitely recognise that, you know, we can't rely on consultation from 2009, and we don't intend to. This is why we're here consulting now as part of the local plan. So I can give you that reassurance that we're not relying on a 2009 study. However, I do think it's still got some really useful things in there that are informing our plans going forward. So Lily, any other questions to pass on?
Yeah, so the next two, the first from Helena, who says, given that the local plan has been in development for so many years, how will it respond to more recent changes that could come about due to COVID, i.e. demand for housing, green space and local workspace? And the second from Miss Skipsey, who says, how will you balance sustainability and climate commitments with these plans for development? So Helena's question first, please.
Again, I'll answer Helena's question. I mean, the local plan has been in development for some time, but what we did do was pause before beginning to undertake this consultation over the last year and understanding the economic impact and just the impact on people's lives over what's happened. So we did a full review of the plan to make sure, did we think it was still fit for purpose? And I think one of the deciding factors in that is we really want a plan that we can help to try and tackle inequality, and inequality that is becoming more evident through, you know, the COVID pandemic, where we felt that we needed to make changes in order to better respond to the current situation. We also did that. And again, you know, standard answer, this is part of the consultations. Does it work? Understanding what the impacts have been on people and, you know, and people's lives. Is this a plan that works for us? For the question on sustainability and climate commitments, Eric, is that something that you want to answer?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Emma. And it's a very good question, and it's one that this local plan has to grapple with. Lewisham Council was one of the first local authorities in the UK to formally declare a climate emergency. So this is certainly high on our agenda to address that through the plan. This will also work in partner with the Council's climate change action plan. So we have been speaking with colleagues in our climate resilience team as well to ensure that we are working from the same playbook effectively. What we hope that we're presenting with this draft local plan is a significant step change from the existing and adopted policies in terms of how we are planning to tackle this. We have a whole chapter dedicated to sustainable design, but it's not the only thing that we are doing. It sort of covers the span of policy topics in the plan, whether you know, dealing with transport and promoting a modal shift away from private car use to more sustainable transport modes, to greening. There's all these sorts of things that we feel that we are trying to address, and definitely we would like to have your feedback on whether we struck the balance right. I think I'll stop there.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, so the next two. First from Malcolm, he says, how does the timescale for the development of the former Hatcham Works site tie in with the recent announcement that this site has been secured by TfL for the Bakerloo Line extension, which would not start until 2024 at the earliest? And second from Chris, who says, is there any recognition of Deptford's historical past?
On the first question from Malcolm, I mean, we're working closely with TfL on that, and it's really great news on the safeguarding for that site, and we will need to make sure that the site allocation is fit for purpose, given that. We've got Julia here. Julia, I don't know if you've got anything further to add on that one, because I'm aware that the site allocation does specifically include the need for any future development to safeguard for the future delivery of the Bakerloo line. If Julia's there. Oh, I think we've lost Julia. She was having some internet connections, but Julia has been leading on our Bakerloo line work, and again working really closely with TfL. I think one of the important things in that site allocation is in that we wanted to protect the future of the Bakerloo line extension, because for that is a primary outcome. The question from Chris, is there any recognition of Deptford's historical past? Yes, and I think that that's something that we'll come to a bit later in the presentation as well. But I think we definitely want, as developments come forward, to see them being responsive and meaningfully responsive to Deptford's rich heritage. So it's definitely something that we want to see happen, and developments here that wouldn't make sense to do them in this way anywhere else, because they link back to that history and that heritage.
Thanks, Emma. Next to the first from Angela, who says, could you explain how new London plan provision will shape the quantum of development on proposed site allocations re aspects such as outdoor space of 10 square metres per child and urban greening? And the second is a comment from Andrea, who says, the most housing need is for families and tall buildings are not suitable. Child-friendly SPD needed to ensure that homes that are child-friendly are built. So 2 questions on children there.
Thanks, Lily. On the question from Angela about the quantum of development and needs for outdoor space and urban greening, Eric, is that something you want to comment on?
Yeah, certainly. So again, very, very important question, and certainly something that's on our radar. In terms of the children's play space requirements, that is something that we are taking forward through the local plan. It's a London plan policy. It forms part of our development plan, and we've just signposted that in the draft new local plan. Urban greening as well. The new London plan has introduced what is called an urban greening factor, which sets out basically minimum standards for greening on a development that should be achieved depending on the nature and scale of that type of development. That applies to major development proposals, but in the local plan, where we can have influence over minor development and householder development as well, we think, again, we've prepared new policies or refreshed policies to really emphasize the need for urban greening, tree planting, etc. Also, within the community infrastructure section of the draft local plan, you'll see what we've done some work working with our colleagues in the Parks and Open Spaces team as well to identify place-based deficiency areas. So what that gives us is an indication of where interventions are needed to ensure that there's a more equal distribution of play space across the borough. And so when funding is secured, whether that's direct on site through a new scheme, or for example, the pooling of Section 106 or community infrastructure levy fundings, we can channel that in the right way. Certainly, it's something that we're, again, trying to reflect in this plan, but we would welcome feedback on whether that is the right approach, whether more should be done in this part of the borough in terms of the quality of provision or the types of facilities that are needed for play.
Thanks, Eric. On the question from Andrea about housing need for families, I think we definitely recognise that we have a need for family housing. I don't think that you could say that every scheme that is tall is automatically unsuitable for children if it's well designed and designed in that way. And I'm aware of the Essential Living scheme that's actually just over the borough in Greenwich, along Deptford Creek, which is a taller building focused around families. But putting that to one side, I think what we recognise is that within buildings of scale and density, there are certain units that lend themselves more to family accommodation. So ones with direct access onto deck space or garden space, and those the units that are lower in height, because we do get variation across sites. I think the other thing that we recognise is the important role that our existing housing stock plays. And although these are policies that sit outside of the locality-based parts of the plan, we do have policies in place that look to protect existing homes from being of a certain size being converted. So we do have a more supportive approach towards conversions proposed in the new local plan, but still with the retention of family units. So I don't think all new development is the answer to that solution. We do have to look at our existing housing stock, because the sites we've got and the scale that we need to deliver in order to deliver against those housing figures, we do recognise that we need to look at our existing stock as well.
Thanks, Emma. I'm going to take a couple of questions from Ria now. So the first one is, in consideration of the fact that neighbouring boroughs have also intensified and developed densely in the immediate vicinity, have you engaged with them and the GLA to set a comprehensive plan for the infrastructure needs of the area? And the second is, a lot of the existing tall buildings in the area are of questionable quality. How can you ensure more tall buildings will not have the same terrible impact visually and be considered eyesores in 10 to 15 years, considering architectural aesthetics can change dramatically?
Thanks for those. Eric, do you want to take the first one about how we're working with the GLA and neighbouring boroughs, because it's definitely something that we are doing?
Yeah, I can definitely take that. So through the plan making process, we have a statutory duty to cooperate with adjoining authorities and other key stakeholders. So there is definitely work that we are undertaking on a regular basis, liaising with our neighbouring authorities. And in fact, we have a joint working group with the other Southeast London boroughs to discuss matters like this. Through the plan process and the examination, we'll be tested on this, and we'll be preparing statements of common ground to show how we have worked together to address these things. We have prepared an infrastructure delivery plan, which is a partner document to the local plan. And we've prepared that working both with internal stakeholders and external stakeholders as well, whether that's utility companies, the NHS, the Environment Agency, you name it. What we've done there is set out what infrastructure we feel is required to support the level of growth that we're planning for in the future, and setting out a schedule of that infrastructure, along with identifying key delivery partners and funding, and where that will be delivered and how. So that's something that we're also taking to our adjoining authorities. Also, I think through the London plan, it's partly the role of the London Mayor in preparing the London plan to set out an overall strategy for London for the delivery of infrastructure. So in a way, that has been addressed through the London plan, and it's just filtering down now through the local plan process.
Thanks for that, Eric. So the other question that we had was about the quality of existing tall buildings in the area. I mean, this might be one that Michael would want to comment on and talk about some of the process that we go through in our current applications around our design policies, the design review panel, and seeking to get that that quality captured in there. Michael, is this something that you want to come in on?
Yeah, sure. So as part of these large regeneration projects that can include tall buildings, we have a rigorous pre-application process. You know, we will meet with the architects, go through site appraisals, analysis, and look at best options for the site and whether a tall building is appropriate in the first place or not. And if one is, the design of that tested with architects, our internal urban designers, but also our external Lewisham Design Review Panel, which is made up of a comprehensive bunch of architects, landscape architects and engineers. There's also a secondary review process with the GLA and the design team, covering all matters from detailed architecture, but also the impact on local views, strategic views, and that will inform our impression of the scheme as officers before we go to a planning committee.
Thank you, Michael. I think we've probably just got time for one more, so I'm going to go to this one from Angela because it's quite a few specific questions here. Okay, so she says, will you change your validation list to comply with the new London Plan policies? 3 types of health impact assessments, whole life carbon, statement health streets assessments, etc. Second, could you consider making the Lewisham Residents Charter a policy to secure more important policy outcomes? And could you require design briefs with meaningful engagement in their development for all site allocations? It's quite a few questions within one there.
Quite a few questions. Sorry, I'm just going up to it because I'm going to need to keep this on the screen as I work my way through them. So I think that, I mean, some of these are obviously sit outside of the local plan. So in terms of our validation list, you know, having the London Plan adopted today, we will now need to make sure that our validation list reflects the requirements of our adopted development plan. So I'm not going to give you a commitment that it will include those exact things, although I would say health impact assessments are in there and have been a requirement, only for a certain scale of scheme. I think it's over 150 units, but that is definitely off the top of my head. So we will need to do that type of exercise. I mean, you know, in terms of the Lewisham Residents Charter, we work across the council and with housing colleagues to make sure that our planning policies about new development coming forward don't, you know, reflect and don't contradict other things. So, you know, I think that is definitely a point to raise, and it can be considered about whether there are things in there that are relevant to planning and need to be in planning policies, because the council wears many hats and has many roles, and planning is one of them. So I think that's something that we would need to consider. And then the final one about requiring design briefs with meaningful engagement for all site allocations. As part of our work following on from the council's local democracy review, we are looking to introduce a number of changes, and one of them being about better pre-application engagement and setting out what we mean by that with developers. We can't bind anyone to do it well. That's always the problem. People can meet the steps but not necessarily do it well, and that's always a frustration of ours as well as the community. The other thing that we want to introduce is a requirement to submit a community audit, where developers at the earliest stage identify what are the things that are on their site that are of value to the community. and to try and have those early conversations and to try and get them thinking about sites in a different way. So there are a number of tools we have that what we would hope is, as we progress those strands of work, complement this emerging policy. I think it's time to probably move on. So Eric, do you want to start the next portion?
Yeah, I can do. Thank you again to everyone for these questions. I think officers generally in debriefing after all of the sessions, we've just really felt that the questions have been really pertinent, and it's good that people are getting engaged and have good knowledge of the borough and are asking the right sorts of questions as well. So it's excellent. So please keep them coming for the next sessions after these presentations. So now we'll look at Deptford. And again, one of the key things that we're trying to do through the local plan here is reinforce the area's strong and successful character. Certainly the Deptford Creek side is part of that, and we'll get, as you can see in the top right slide, there's also other areas where it's not just about the maritime heritage, it's also the industrial character and the open spaces. So again, being in a London Plan Opportunity area, this is also an area that's identified as a key regeneration area for the borough, where we're not shying away from the fact that it will contribute significantly to helping us meet our housing targets and needs for employment workspace, but also it needs to be managed, changed, and we're preparing this strategy to help with that process. Again, a lot of this is building on some of the underused or vacant industrial sites and transforming them into mixed-use developments and a real fabric of mixed-use neighborhoods. Certainly the historic High Street at Deptford is something we're looking, well, it's an asset to the area and something we want to build upon, recognizing the key role it has as a district center and a focus for a community life on top of commercial and leisure activity. Maximizing the recreational and amenity value of the River Thames and Deptford Creek side is definitely something that we are promoting again through the new plan and identifying a Thames policy area with more further detail on how we can achieve objectives around that. Most of the north of the borough falls within a creative enterprise zone. So it's one of the first that's been designated in London. Lewisham has one of the, pre-pandemic, certainly it had one of the fastest growing sectors in creative and digital industries and a real host of important educational and cultural institutions that gave rise to that designation. And now we're looking to build on that through the local plan and working with other service areas in the council. Deptford Market certainly to remain a vibrant hub and focus for community activity. And again, like North Deptford, we just have to acknowledge that many of the site allocations that have been identified already have planning consent and are currently under construction or there are proposals to start soon. And that includes Convoy's Wharf, but also lots of stuff that's been happening around Deptford Creek side as well. So from the characterization study, where Deptford was identified as an area whose character could be re-examined. So certainly exhibiting elements of strong character, but looking at those areas where and sites which could make perhaps a more positive contribution to local character. That's what we're trying to identify through this local plan. Again, some locations are suitable for tall buildings, And we can expect elements of higher density development due to the designation as a growth area in the London plan, or as an opportunity area in the London plan, a growth area in the local plan, but also just recognizing the good access to jobs, services, and facilities. We feel that higher density development might be more appropriate in some locations here. Certainly there's an emphasis on delivering heritage-led regeneration schemes, and looking at some of the conservation areas as well, where we want to conserve and enhance the significance of those areas. And similar to North Deptford, integrating new neighborhoods and sites with existing communities and neighborhoods as well. Some of the planned and future improvements to transport and community infrastructure include a DLR upgrade where funding has been secured, enhance existing bus services, again, the cycle superhighway, and the river bus ferry services at Convoys Wharf. Significantly in the new plan, we're looking at transforming the A2 into a healthy street. So the London plan sets out healthy streets principles, and we think this is a key movement corridor, has real opportunities to have a more welcoming and pleasant environment for those walking and cycling. But it's important that it also has a very rich character that we need to make sure is preserved as new development does come forward. Certainly the North Lewisham Links has been very successful, and we want to continue building on those successes. Convoys Wharf, there will be significant transformation of that site, but what we want to do through that is open up the riverside to everyone. So it's not just for the residents that will be moving into that area or the businesses, it's creating linkages across the entire north area and beyond to ensure that everyone can enjoy access to the waterfront and new open space alongside it. As part of the heritage-led regeneration, retention and refurbishment of the Olympia building. And we want to continue to work with our partners in the cultural and creative industries and educational institutions. So Trinity Laban, Deptford College, and the Albany, really building on the strengths of this area in terms of the creative enterprise zone. Landscape and public open spaces are also quite critical given the amount of growth that we're planning in the area. It's already been mentioned through the Q&As that it's important that when we're developing at this scale that people need high quality parks and open spaces at the doorstep. So that includes improvements to existing parks, but wherever possible, introducing new public open and green spaces. And I just wanted to mention as well about the North Lewisham Links, because it does come up in several of the slides. It's really been sort of a community-led initiative to improve walking and cycle routes across the borough, and it's something that over time the development industry has really engaged with, because planning officers have been insisting on developers engaging with that, and it's a program that we're continuing to build off of, but we think it's been so successful that we're expanding it now to other parts of the borough through the local plan. So each of the main character areas in the borough, north, east, south, west, and central, will have their own links policy. So hopefully together that creates a borough-wide network of walking and cycling routes, and linking parks and open spaces as well. So in New Cross, we are looking again at reinforcing the area's strong and successful character, building on some of the strengths of Goldsmiths, the historic High Street, and the opportunities that are arising through the arrival of the Bakerloo Line extension. Again, it's a key area for regeneration of the borough. Some growth in managed changes proposed, perhaps slightly more moderate than other parts of the area that we've been looking at today. but certainly as a New Cross and a district center will continue to remain a focus for commercial, retail and leisure activity. Also linking in with the creative enterprise zone. As we discussed previously, the former Hatcham work site as a key site in terms of safeguarding land for the Bakerloo line extension. But also, once that is delivered, a more comprehensive mixed-use development coming forward that complements the rest of the high street. So the characterization study looked at the New Cross area as an area that could be re-examined. Certainly there's a strong historic character there, but also opportunities to strengthen that character. For instance, looking at gaps in the streetscape and where we might be able to introduce new development to create a more contiguous frontage along the A2 or in behind it. Some locations may be suitable for taller buildings. However, there are definite sensitivities that all development proposals will need to respond to. But again, some of the sites we are expecting some higher density development to come forward, particularly given the existing public transport accessibility levels in the area, and which will only be improved with the arrival of the Bakerloo line. And like the other areas, Deptford and North Deptford that we looked at, it's about integrating new sites and neighborhoods with the existing, so that everything complements the wider area. Some of the planned and committed transport and community infrastructure projects: overground upgrade, the Bakerloo line extension, river bus services, at least linking to that, the transformation of the A2 with significant public realm improvements, including the North Lewisham links, which cuts across there. We're looking at enhanced community health facilities at Waldron and Besson Street, and also the continued support of our local institutions and cultural venues. Working with Goldsmiths University, for example, is a key partner. Again, looking at investment to existing open spaces and wherever practical, introducing new public open spaces, particularly on larger sites, such as the former Hatcham Works, where there's real opportunities to ensure that higher density development is complemented with spaces for retreat. Public realm improvements around New Cross Gate Station, and really just trying to make the area safer and easier to access for everyone, particularly for those walking and cycling. And then there will be a commitment to deliver the continuation of the Cycle Route 1 from Peckham to Deptford Creekside. So I appreciate that's a very quick snapshot of these areas, but hopefully we can flesh that out a little bit more through your questions.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, so first two. The first is from Chris, who says, how are developers made to keep their promises? The development of Deptford Market Yard was originally going to provide artist workspaces. They become retail and food outlets. And the second is from Keith, who says, how will a recent move towards permitted development for change of use from retail to residential within conservation areas be addressed by Lewisham? So the first on developers, please. Excuse me.
Thanks, Lily. I'm going to ask Michael to come in on this one because he knows the details around Deptford Market Yard.
Thanks. So yes, on Deptford Market Yard, the planning permission that was granted in 2011 set out a flexible use across the entire site. So the railway arches and the carriage ramp had a permission which included retails, workshop, food and beverage, and offices, I believe, with the what we call St. Paul's House in the yard, containing 2 restaurant buildings. So it's always had a consented mixed use on that site.
Thanks, Michael. In answer to Keith's question on PD rights, I think, you know, the difficulty is that the local plan only comes into effect when we have an application for planning permission. What we have is an increasing move by central government to take things that would normally need planning permission and make them permitted development, meaning that our policies wouldn't bite. So the way that you can look to address that as a local planning authority is to use something called an Article 4 direction, which effectively removes that right to do that work automatically, and means that you would require, you'd be required to make a planning application. That is not something that is, you know, currently on our list of things to do, but we are, you know, but these changes have come in, and with further consultation on further proposals very recently. So I think it's something that we're keeping an eye on to see what the impact will be of that. But you know, the making of an Article 4 direction is a huge amount of work, with lots of evidence needed of harm and notification to the Secretary of State. So I don't want to underplay just what a task that is to do to make the case. So I don't have an answer for you in terms of local plan, because the local plan won't come into effect if something has permitted development rights. But it's definitely something that is moving so fast from central government that we're just going to have to keep an eye on and see what we need to do, but also what we're able to do, given, you know, frankly, the number of officers that we have to do that type of work.
Thanks, Annette. Okay, so the next two. The first is from Chris, who says, there is a development of 100 plus flats still empty ever since being built about 4 years ago on the junction to New Cross Road, Watson Street. How is this allowed to happen? And the second is from Emily on the allocations for Hatcham Works. So the site allocations in 2013 recommended 200 houses, but the latest plan says over 900. Why the huge increase? Thank you.
Thanks for those. I'm not aware of the particular site that that Chris is responding to, but I think Michael has indicated that he can take that question, so I'll pass over to Michael.
Hi, yes. So I am aware that the site's taken a long time to get itself sorted. The developer did make an application to amend some of the detailing on the building to comply with fire regs, to comply with building regs changes in light of the Grenfell situation. So that was an amendment to some of the balcony and the windows. I don't know if that's been undertaken, but that's something that we can follow up when we do the response back to everybody.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we'll need to look into that one a bit further and what's happened there. To answer Emily's question about the change from the last site allocation for Hatcham Works and the Sainsbury's site and this one, I mean, when we're looking at doing site allocations, we part of that process is to engage with the landowners. And when we were doing our last lot of site allocations, you know, I think Sainsbury's as a retailer were very much focused on a large format store. If I remember rightly, I think they wanted 2 on the site plus a petrol station without any residential development above them. And what that meant was, in order to reflect what might be deliverable on that site, it wasn't going to be able to provide as much housing. They have, you know, as I know you are well aware from the application we had in and thankfully we've withdrawn, you know, their aspirations for the site have changed significantly, along with how they would look to integrate a retail store in with housing, and that has resulted in the higher level, plus, you know, the impact of increased transport infrastructure on that site as well. So hopefully that answers the question.
Emma, can I also just add one bit here?
Yep, please do.
Yeah, so one of the things that's also changed through the new London plan is the methodology the London Mayor employed for coming up with the potential capacity of housing sites across London. Given London's housing needs, the methodology was adjusted. So what you get is sites that are in areas of high public transport accessibility, in opportunity areas. The indicative capacity is calculated as being higher than it would have previously. So I think it's also in terms of looking at the landowner's aspirations, but also looking at what change at the London plan level in terms of how housing capacity is set. That's also influenced the figure that we've got to this stage. We've prepared a technical paper which sets out how we've arrived at the indicative site capacities for all our proposed site allocations. That's called the Site Allocations Background Paper. And you can, if you're interested, you can access that from the Commonplace website. It's the part 3 tile on Lucian's 5 character areas. And if you go into that tile, you can read the further details there for that site and all the other sites.
Thank you both. I'm going to go to the next two now. So the first is from Helena, who says, "We have not seen any mention in the local plan about the fact that the Deptford High Street Conservation Area is on the at-risk register. How does the council intend to address this?" And the second is from Angela, who says, "Can you please review and include the Deptford Heritage and Character Assessment prepared on behalf of the Deptford Neighbourhood Action?" Here's the link. So who's best to answer those two?
Thanks for that. I'll take Helena's question, but happy for any fellow panelists to indicate if they can help with answering that as well. I mean, I think that the point of the local plan is to seek to improve the state of our conservation area. So we are aware and recognise that it's at risk. The appraisal that's been undertaken recognises that, and we have secured an additional post in our enforcement team to try and help drive that forward. So I think it's interesting that you don't feel that there are the policies in there that are strong enough to recognise that. So I think that's a point that we'll, I don't think we'll answer tonight or in writing, but I think it's something that we'll need to take away, because that's why we're coming out and asking people. But it's definitely our intention to make sure that we've got policies that ensure that our the approach taken in our conservation areas is appropriate, and that we have the right tools in place, and that we are also working across the council with our economic development team about how we support particularly tricky conservation areas like Deptford High Street, with a number of small retailers along it, and how we engage and how we ensure that they understand what there is and isn't, what is and isn't acceptable there. So I think that's probably just a useful comment for us to note, and to make sure that the plan does respond to that. Sorry, Lily, what was the other question? It was about the DNA. I think I'm going to give the same answer, that we can definitely consider that. If you think that's a useful bit of evidence base that we should be referencing, we will note that and review it and see whether that is something that we should and could use. So thank you for flagging it to us.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, the next two. The first is from Malcolm, who says, how realistic is it to make the A2 a healthy street, given that it is the main access for traffic into from London from Kent? Have studies been done to see how much of the traffic on the A2 is from outside the borough, London? And the next one is also from Miss Skipsey, who says, Waldron Heath Health is already struggling with capacity and with lack of access. How will access to medical care be ensured for increased populations?
Thank you for those. Eric, I don't know if you've got any anything to say on the A2 healthy streets. I mean, I think that we certainly recognise that the A2 as a major road and as a TfL road has a role to play in movement across London. It's interesting that the London plan is looking to promote a significant shift away from car usage. So we do want to make sure that we're supporting that wherever we can, and looking at the principles of healthy streets and how they can be applied to busy roads. And that is something that we're working on with Southwark as well, so that it's a joint piece of work sort of along the Old Kent Road as well, but trying to rebalance so that it's more pedestrian and cycle friendly, and really looking at how we can make those improvements. But I think we're very realistic that the A2 is not going to stop being the A2, and we're working very closely with TfL on that. And TfL are also looking at this much more widely, including the traffic coming into that road and into the borough. So I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add to that, but hopefully that gives you sort of some information. And I think what it isn't about is turning the A2 into a quiet road and displacing that through residential areas. That's not what it is. It's about making the A2 a safer and more pedestrian friendly space, rather than a barrier, which I think is very much what it is at the moment, and is the feedback we get from the people who use it and live on it, because we do have people living on it as well, don't we?
Emma, I would just like to add to that as well. I think the local plan is part of a marker for the Greater London Authority as well, to work with us to realise those improvements in terms of recognising it is a key road for London, but also rebalancing where we can the public realm to give greater priority to pedestrians and cyclists. And with the plans for the Bakerloo line extension and some of the pinch points that you get along there, certainly that's something that we're going to have to address in a very strategic way, working with Transport for London and the Mayor of London as well. So we feel there's a real opportunity to realize improvements. And even within the site allocations, we've looked at, for example, at Hatcham Works, a new bridge over the rail line so that you can reroute some of the cycle traffic to a just behind the A2 to provide a more pleasant environment and safer and accessible way of traveling along and across that part of the borough.
Thanks, Eric. So moving on to the question about capacity and access to the Waldron. So part of the draft local plan, sitting alongside that, is our infrastructure delivery plan, which is seeking to address just this type of thing, that with an increased population, how can we ensure that there's sufficient access to healthcare. So as part of that, we do work really closely with the CCG, which is the clinical commissioning or clinical care group, but and also NHS colleagues. And one of the things that they are particularly looking at is a hub-based model for delivering healthcare, and looking at the Waldron Health Centre as one of those hubs that can serve this area. So they have been looking at a specific programme at the Waldron around increasing some of the clinical capacity there, and we have awarded some Section 106 money to increase that clinical capacity within the existing volume of the building. We also have developments like Besson Street, a new surgery space there, so relocated from Queen's Road, and on sites such as Convoys Wharf there's space for allocated for healthcare if that's needed. So we work really closely with the CCG, and obviously over the last year, in terms of council relationships, they've only got better with the CCG and our NHS colleagues who've been doing, amazing work, including on that local level and with our public health colleagues. So to say that we're live to the issue of making sure people have access to the right healthcare, that's very high on the agenda. We continue to engage with them, and that IDP is going to be a really important document for us to make sure that we can support this level of growth.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, the next two. First from Nick, who says, the southernmost areas of the north area, i.e. St John's, Brookmill Park, Tanners Hill, haven't been shown either the Deptford or New Cross key principal pages, nor have they been mentioned. It's important that these areas are represented in the plan and the consultation. And the second is from Fergus, who says, we've talked a lot about larger sites. How does the local plan deal with fine-grained development of individual smaller buildings? It's a strong character of Deptford High Street and around. So to Nick's comment first, please.
Thanks for that. On Nick's question, Eric, is that something you want to comment on about how the plan responds to those areas?
Yeah, I think I would just like to say that if that's how you feel, you definitely need to make that known through the consultation. What we're trying to do through the plan is provide a more granular look at the borough. But if there are parts that you feel have been left behind, then certainly let us know. And what we need to say is that the plan right now is just at a very draft stage, that we can continue to refine it, and it will be subject to another round of public consultation. So the north area is a very complex and intricate area. There's a lot of different sort of sub-localities within it, and we've tried to capture as best we can, but certainly we can revisit the proposals as they are right now and provide more emphasis to those areas if you think that is required. So please let us know.
Thanks for that. And I'm just going back, so we're getting lots of questions through now to find Fergus's question. So we've talked a lot about large sites and how do we deal with finer grain development. So yes, I think we have talked a lot about large sites tonight. That's very much reflective of the fact that our site allocations, which link to these local areas, are for larger sites only. But please be assured that's not a reflection that the local plan seeks to overlook the smaller grain sites, because we recognise that for most people that is their experience of planning the street where they live, the high streets where they shop, and we want to make sure that we've got policies in there that help to ensure that those smaller scale interventions into the places where we live and work and play are of good quality and responsive to the local context and character. And I would say, I think that applies, and that quality test applies whether you're within or whether within or outside of a conservation area as well. So we did have an earlier session on the local plan, which was all about design quality and just that type of thing. So you might find it useful to give that a watch, but I can definitely hopefully reassure you that we do recognise that, and we have policies looking at smaller sites, how they come forward. We are progressing a small sites supplementary planning document as well, so definitely giving those attention. But I take your point that tonight we've focused on something different.
Thank you, Emma. On to the next two. So first from Mark, who says, in relation to Sayers Court Park and Convoys Wharf, do the local plan and site allocation reference the Lennox History Shipbuilding Project as creative employment and heritage development in terms of intensification? And the second one is a comment from Angela, who says, in my view, Deptford's high streets and parades all need an Article 4 protection. It is known from other shopping streets and parades what happens if you do not take this up, and the pandemic will not have helped the balance sheets of local, non-essential businesses and community facilities. The importance of these centres for local employment, connective social infrastructure and services is profound. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I mean, I can take Mark's question because I did see that pop up earlier, Mark, and I quickly had a check in the plan. And I mean, we do reference our support for the Lennox. It's in the supporting text for the policy, not in the policy itself. But I think, you know, we welcome comments on whether that's appropriate. We have, I think, tried to stick to what the last site allocation was and what the planning permission is, but definitely have referenced in there the Lennox and our support. And I do note your point about how we consider that as a creative employment and heritage development. So I think that's something we can give some thought to. So did someone else want to?
Yeah, sorry, Emma, just to clarify, I think that is in the supporting text of the Thames policy area.
Yes, sorry, yes, it is.
Policy. So if you are interested in reading about that, then go to that section of the plan.
Thanks, Eric. On the question on Article 4, and I've spotted that Malcolm has also asked a question about Article 4s. I mean, and should we be basing, you know, 20 years on how many officers that we have at the moment? I mean, an Article 4 process is separate to the local plan. So this as a long-term strategy will not dictate you know, our approach on Article 4s. That is a separate stream of work, and I think it's fair to say that in most of the sessions I've been at, people have said, you know, what are you doing around Article 4? So I think that's we're hearing that. I also have to be realistic, and in order to deliver an Article 4, it's a huge amount of work, and the officers who would do that are currently doing the local plan. So, you know, I don't want to mislead anyone, even though it's probably an unpopular message to hear, that it's something that we'll be able to just pick up and get going with. But what I can assure is that we are hearing from people that they think that the tool of an Article 4 is something that we should be considering to strengthen, you know, the application of our policies, and we will consider that, but it is not in our current plan of work. But that is something that we review yearly, and we will do so again. So hopefully that's answered both of those questions.
Thanks, Emma. Do you want to make this the final couple then? So see where.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Given time.
Yeah. So, excuse me one moment. Going to go to this one from Ria, who says, "Is there a healthy street master plan for Deptford and/or committed funds for healthy streets for Deptford that underpins the local plan?" So I think we've probably just got time to answer that one. That's okay.
Well, I think that in Deptford, there's obviously the livable neighbourhood plan that is looking at some of those principles of healthy streets. We have our North Lewisham Links plan, which is a master plan promoting improved walking and cycling. There are Section 106 pots of money that can go towards things like that. We've also we've used that in the past to get some match funding from the GLA. So we're pretty used to bidding for good schemes and seeking to make those happen. So I think that yes, there are plans out there that are looking at those principles. They're not necessarily called a Healthy Streets master plan, though, is what I would answer. I don't know if we've got time for one more, Lily. We've just got, if we've got one more quick one. I'm just aware that we're having some, I mean, really good questions tonight. It's really encouraging to get this level of involvement and interaction from everyone. So I mean, I'm happy to take one more quick one.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to search for a quick one for you. This one I think is good from Ms. Skipsey, who says, how will you be securing the Baker Line extension in order to support the increased population and work opportunities? How do you spot other transport options like increased buses, car transport and cycling lanes?
Thanks for that. So I mean, we're working really closely with TfL London Buses around the full package of enhancements that we need. So some of those around the individual sites themselves. So things like Convoys Wharf have additional bus services. We would see the same on, that was secured on the Surrey Canal Triangle scheme via that scheme, and we've also had a successful bid for HIF funding to fund the new overground station at Surrey Canal. So I think we recognise that there are a range of modes, not least the Bakerloo line, but we work with TfL and we work very closely with them and very well with them, and we look at those enhancements across the borough, but particularly in this area, because it really does need to be there to underpin the work. And obviously some of that is historic around things like the improvements to Deptford Station as well. So yeah, hopefully that's given you the answer, and I promise I won't Lily, I won't throw you one last question. So I think this is probably the point where we just sort of say what happens next. So the consultation closes on the 11th of April. We will consider all feedback, and then the next round of consultation in the autumn, which will include a consultation statement where we will respond to all the comments made and hopefully demonstrate how that's been used to inform the plan. So this is where you can tell us what you think. You can do that via the Commonplace website, email, post. As I say, 11th of April is the end date for that, and we've got a series of sessions, so the team are incredibly busy doing those, and we're having a repeat of this session as well next week. So we're doing each of the areas twice. So at this point, I would just say a really big thank you to those who've attended tonight, to those who have asked questions, and really importantly for me, a massive thank you to the team, and particularly Eric, who is doing a phenomenal amount of work on this, including these sessions, and for Lily and Sam, who help all of these run smoothly. So it's a massive thank you from me. Any questions that are unanswered, we will come back in writing, and we will share this, and a video of this will go up online as well. So thank you everyone for attending tonight. Good night.